Hi, my name is Sam, and I'm going to be discussing and demonstrating some of the tools you would find in a woodworking shop. Today, we will focus on the machine that is considered by many woodworkers to be the most important and most versatile tool in the shop, the table saw. The table saw's primary function is to make rib cuts. Rib cuts are cuts that are made parallel to the wood grain, as opposed to cross cuts, which are made perpendicular to the grain. Keep in mind that table saws can come in many shapes and sizes. This particular saw is what is called a cabinet saw. It is larger and higher powered, but not very mobile since it weighs over 500 pounds. This is in contrast to a contractor saw or job site saw that is smaller and more portable. So to begin, I just want to point out the basic parts of the table saw and their functions. Here we have the blade, which is, believe it or not, meant to just cut the wood. Down here on the cabinet, we have two hand wheels. This one here on the front is used to raise and lower the blade from the table. The thicker your workpiece is, the higher you'll need to raise the blade. As a general rule, you only want a little more than the height of a blade tooth coming out above the workpiece. That is if you're making a through cut, meaning that the blade will cut all the way through the workpiece. With a non-through cut, such as a dado, your blade will need to be lower than the height of the workpiece. Next, we have this hand wheel on the side. This one is used to change the angle of the blade relative to the table. As a result, will change the angle of the cut. Some job site saws won't have this hand wheel because the blade angle adjustment is built into the blade height hand wheel. Next, we have the fence. We use the fence to guide the workpiece through the blade at the desired distance from the blade. As you can see here, there is a measuring tape on the rail to tell you how far the fence is from the blade. Next, we have the miter gauge. This guides through the slots on the table and is used to make cross cuts and miter cuts, which are just used to make cuts at an angle. Also, if you're doing a lot of cross cutting on your table saw, you may be interested in looking into a cross cut sled. Now, if you're in the market for a table saw, there are many specs to consider while you're shopping around, but the main spec to consider would be the rip capacity. This is the max distance between the blade and the fence. As you can see, the further it can go is a wider rip capacity. Now, the wider the rip capacity, the more expensive your table saw will be. So next, I want to talk about different types of blades and various safety features that are part of the table saw. I want to talk about the different types of blades and their uses. Here we have 4 blades: a combination blade, a rip blade, a crosscut blade, and a dado blade stack. So first, I want to talk about the general anatomy of a blade. First thing to consider is the number of teeth. This on the rip blade has fewer teeth and will have a more aggressive cut because they will remove more material as each tooth passes through the wood. This will allow a faster feed rate as well, which is how fast you can push the wood through the blade. This is ideal for rip cuts, which are typically longer cuts and need to remove more material more quickly. Also, fewer teeth will create less friction and reduce the likelihood of burn marks left on your workpiece. And here we have the crosscut blade, which, as you can see, has many more teeth. This is ideal for going, as you remember, perpendicular to the grain. So this will result in a cleaner cut because crosscuts are typically harder on the blade. And here is the combination blade. This is a balance between the rip blade and the crosscut blade. As you can see, this has about halfway between the number of teeth that these two do. And they have these large gullets here to remove more material. Here we have the dado stack, and this is used for cutting grooves and dados, as you can see here in your workpiece. You can change the number of blades you have to get the desired width of the cut. Here we have shims that you can put between each blade to get the desired width for the cut. Here we have different inserts for the table saw. this is what the blade will go through, like this. And this one is larger for the dado stack, and this one is narrower for the other blades. Next, I want to talk about kerf size. Kerf size is simply the width of the blade tooth. There are two common kerf sizes, and they're simply referred to as full kerf and thin kerf. The full kerf is 1/8 inch thick, and the thin kerf is 3/32 thick. There are pros and cons to both. Lower powered saws can benefit from thin kerf blades because it requires less energy to force a thinner blade through the material. However, thin kerf blades are more susceptible to subtle flexing when going through hard or thick material. Next, I want to talk about some of the safety features of the table saw and personal protective equipment you should wear while using the table saw. First, we have the safety glasses. Safety glasses are very important because when you're making cuts, dust and chips will be flying in your direction. It is important not to get it in your eyes. Next, we have hearing protection. The table saw is an incredibly loud piece of equipment. It is always important to protect your ears. And here we have a dust mask. The table saw also creates a very high amount of dust, so you'll always want to wear a dust protection mask. Here we have a safety feature of the table saw, which is actually 3 pieces in one. The riving knife, the anti-kickback, and the blade guard. The riving knife is important because when pushing a workpiece through the blade, some workpieces will have a tendency to pinch after they've been cut, and this keeps the workpiece from pinching on the blade. Next, here we have the anti-kickback. So sometimes with a table saw, if a workpiece gets stuck, it'll have a tendency to get kicked back towards you. What these do right here is it'll actually stop the workpiece from going backwards towards you. And this protects or covers the entire blade and will prevent you from cutting your fingers off. Here we have 2 different types of push sticks. Push sticks are used to prevent in certain cuts from getting your hands too close to the blade. This is a common one if you're making very narrow cuts. It allows you to keep your hand away from the blade. And here we have a feather board. This is used to push the workpiece up against the fence so that you can make a controlled cut. Now I'm going to demonstrate some actual cuts on the table saw. First, we're going to start with the rip cut, the most common cut on a table saw. As usual, have your safety mask, glasses, and ear protection. First, you'll want to lower the blade so that it is just about 1 tooth height above the workpiece. Right about there. And now we will make our cut. Next, I'm going to demonstrate a crosscut using the miter gauge. The miter gauge slides in these slots. And remember that crosscuts are made perpendicular to the grain. So now I'm going to demonstrate a cut using the miter gauge. Next, I'm going to demonstrate a dado cut. A dado cut uses a dado stack, which is several blades stacked together to make a wider cut. Here is an example of a more narrow dado. For example, imagine this being the side of a drawer, and the base of the drawer would go into this little slot. So dados are used very commonly in woodworking. So now I'm going to demonstrate a dado cut on another piece of wood. So as you can see, the groove cut right here matches the width of the entire stack of the dado blade. I wanted to close with a quick tip, and that is to use a test piece before making an actual cut on a project piece. This way, if there's a problem with your blade height or the fence position, you'll know before actually ruining a project piece. So I hope you enjoyed this intro to the table saw. Make sure to check back next week for a video on the bandsaw and the miter saw. Thanks for watching.